Billy the Kid pushed through the bat-wing doors of the saloon into the cool desert night, the sour smell of whiskey and cigar smoke still clinging to his shirt as the piano behind him stumbled to a halt and then picked up a different tune. It was late enough that the sky over the New Mexico territory had gone to coal black, pricked with hard, distant stars, and the main street of the little town, dusty even in moonlight, lay mostly quiet. His boots thudded off the warped planks of the saloon porch as he reached for the brim of his hat and tugged it a little lower, thinking only of his horse, of the long, easy ride he'd planned back to the place he was calling home for the week. Then a shout, raw, angry, and close, cut across the street like the crack of a whip. "You don't do what I say, you and your little damn farm will pay the price, you worthless whore!" The voice was big and mean, the kind of sound that made lesser men step inside and pretend they'd heard nothing. Billy paused before his boot reached the dirt, his body tightening the way it always did when trouble was nearby. Down near the end of the porch, by the steps leading into the street, a big man in a dark vest and trail-dusted pants shoved a woman so hard that she stumbled off the boardwalk and went to her knees in the dirt with a small scream, her hands breaking her fall just barely before her face hit the ground. Lantern light from the general store and a hotel window lit the scene in jerks and streaks, and in that throbbing yellow glow, Billy saw the man draw back his arm as if getting ready to hit her again. Nobody moved. A pair of old-timers in rocking chairs pretended to be asleep. One deputy across the street, badge catching a glint of light, looked away like the stars had suddenly become mighty interesting. Billy had seen that kind of silence before, in other towns where one name owned everything. He just didn't know whose name this was yet. He stepped down off the porch without thinking about it, boots whispering in the dust as his long coat swayed against his hips, and his hand hovered close to the revolver at his side, not quite drawing, not yet. "Hey!" His voice rang sharp between the low buildings. "What are you doing with that girl? What in hell did she do to you?" The big man turned, the lanterns catching his face full. Thick jaw bristled with a few days' beard, nose broken once and badly set, eyes the pale gray of water you didn't trust. He was a head taller than Billy, shoulders filling his vest to the point of straining the stitching. The woman on the ground looked up too, a twist of hair falling free from her bun, and for a heartbeat, Billy almost forgot about the man. Her hair was the kind of color the sun liked, somewhere between copper and wheat, catching red when it hit the light. And even under dust and tears, his eye picked out the faint spray of freckles across her cheeks and nose. Pretty as a spring morning, bruised like something you found after a storm.
"Get away from us, boy!" the big man snapped, his lip drawing up in a sneer.
Up close, Billy could see the flush on his neck, the tremor of whiskey in his hands. "You don't want a part of this." "That a fact," Billy said, his tone almost lazy. "Looks to me like you got a part of her face already." The woman's eyes locked on his, big, green, full of panic that wasn't for herself. She looked at him like he was the last train out of a burning town. "Don't leave," that look said, even if her mouth didn't dare. The big man stepped between them, shoulders rolling, fists flexing. "She's my wife," he growled, jabbing a thick thumb toward his chest. "And I'll do whatever I damn please with my own wife. Now get gone if you don't want real trouble." Wife. The word hit Billy like a cold splash of well water. But what hit harder were the marks he could see, now that he was closer. The purple smudge at the edge of her jaw, the swelling along her lip, the way she held one arm a little funny, like ribs underneath were sore. He'd done his share of wrong, more than his share if you listened to the posters with his face on them, but raising a hand to a woman turned his stomach in a way Gunsmoke never had. "Funny thing," Billy said softly, eyes not leaving the girl's. "Where I come from, a man who beats his wife in the street ain't much of a man at all." The deputies across the way shifted, their hands drifting toward their guns and then dropping again. One of them swallowed visibly and called, "Tom, maybe let it be. Sheriff might not like—" The big man, Tom, snapped his head around. "Sheriff works for my father like everyone else in this town," he snarled before turning his glare back to Billy. "I told you to walk away, kid." He stepped closer, and up close, Billy smelled the liquor on his breath, saw the little white pulse at the corner of his eye, the way his jaw clenched, not just with anger, but with the certainty that nothing in this dirt-stripped town could touch him. That made something inside Billy go very, very still. "One last chance," Tom said. "Turn around. This ain't your business." Billy sighed, slow, like he regretted the whole evening. His hand moved, quicker than the flick of a snake's tongue. Steel whispered. Before Tom could even process it, Billy's Colt was out and aimed not at his chest, but at his right hand, where it hovered near his own holster. "You're right about one thing," Billy said, voice suddenly cold as the steel he held. "Your business ain't mine, but her crying in the dirt is everybody's business, far as I'm concerned." The street was so quiet that a dog's bark 2 blocks over sounded like it was in the next doorway. Tom's nostrils flared. "You have any idea who you're talking to?" "Some drunk piece of work named Tom who thinks hitting women makes him tall," Billy said. His eyes flicked up and down the man in one quick sweep. "That about cover it?" The girl sucked in a breath, like she couldn't believe somebody had finally said it out loud.
Tom did what men like him always did when their bluff was called. He lunged. His hand went for the pistol at his hip, shoulders dipping forward. Billy's hand twitched. He didn't aim to kill. Not for this. Not yet. His shot cracked across the quiet street, the muzzle flash stinging his own eyes for an instant. Tom howled, his pistol flying from his grip as the bullet slammed into his wrist, carving a searing line and sending blood spattering across the dust. He staggered back, clutching his arm, staring in disbelief. "You son of a—" "Don't finish that," Billy said calmly, the smoke still curling from his revolver. "I'm sentimental about mothers." The deputies had their guns half drawn now, sweat standing out on their foreheads. One called, weakly, "Kid, you best ride on. You don't know what you just—" "Billy," the other deputy hissed at him, voice barely a whisper. "That's Tom Pike. His daddy runs everything from here to the river. You—" Tom was backing away now, face twisted in pain and rage. "You're dead," he spat at Billy. "You hear me? Dead. My father will burn your name off this territory, and you—" He jabbed his good hand toward the woman, who was trembling as she climbed to her feet. "You're finished. Your daddy's precious little farm is cinder. Enjoy your hero while you can." Billy took a step forward, gun still leveled. "You come near her again," he said softly, deadly quiet. "I'll aim higher next time." Tom's eyes flared with a promise that could have set the sky alight. Then he turned and stumbled away, cradling his bleeding wrist, shoulders hunched not in defeat, but in a fury too big for his skin. 2 of his men, who Billy hadn't even noticed lurking in the shadows near the stables, came running to help him, throwing the kid looks that were equal parts hatred and fear. They bundled Tom into a saddle and rode off toward the dark end of town, hooves hammering the night. No one stepped in their way. No one ever did. Billy reholstered his Colt, the movement easy, practiced, and finally turned his full attention to the woman. She'd brushed some of the dust from her long skirt with shaking hands, but her knees were still streaked with dirt, and there was a thin smear of blood along one palm where a stone had cut skin. Up close, the freckles stood out against the pallor of her cheeks, and the green of her eyes was even more startling, like bits of prairie grass after rain. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, softer now. She nodded, then shook her head, then laughed once in a way that sounded halfway to breaking. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think you just signed both our death warrants." "Wouldn't be the first one I signed," Billy said with a crooked, rueful smile. "Come on, we can't stay in the open. Where's your horse?" "He took it," she said dully, gesturing down the street in the direction Tom had gone.
He said I didn't need one unless I planned on running, and running was against my vows." Her mouth twisted on that last word. Billy's jaw hardened. "Then you ride mine. I'll keep us alive long enough to argue about vows later." He led her quickly to the hitching post outside the saloon, untied his bay gelding with swift, sure movements. The horse snorted, sensing the tension. Billy put a calming hand along its neck. "Easy, Malachi. We're just taking a little night ride." He cupped his hands to boost the woman into the saddle. She made a small sound as bruised ribs protested, but she set her jaw and swung up, skirts tangling awkwardly around her boots. Stronger than she looked, he thought. Stronger than anyone had allowed her to be. With a quick motion, he swung up behind her, one arm coming around to hold the reins, the other bracing lightly at her waist to steady her. He could feel the tremor in her muscles, the sharp staccato drum of her heart where her back pressed to his chest. "Hold on," he murmured near her ear. "To what?" she asked, voice unsteady. "Whatever you like," he said. And then he dug his heels in, and the bay launched forward into the night at a gallop, leaving the town and its silent witnesses behind in a swirl of dust. They rode hard until the lantern lights had fallen away and the town was nothing but a faint glow behind them. Finally, when the horse's breath came loud and ragged and the moon rode high, Billy pulled them off the main road into a shallow arroyo lined with scrub and a few stunted cottonwoods. He slid down, then helped her dismount, his hands gentle even when they had to grip bruised flesh. He built a small fire in a hollow, careful to shield it from view, and only when the flames were licking low did he finally sit opposite her, knees up, hat pushed back. "Name's Billy," he said. He didn't add the rest. If she hadn't recognized him yet, she would soon enough. "What do they call you?" "Nora," she said after a moment, wrapping her arms around herself as the night chill settled. "Nora Byrne." The name tugged at something in his memory. A rancher named Byrne had come up in talk in town earlier in the week. Something about land near a spring and a narrow pass, about a man with more pride than sense standing in front of a tide you couldn't turn. "Your daddy got land near the North Pass?" he asked. "Byrne Springs?" She nodded slowly. "He did," she said, "until today." The way she said it made him frown. "Tell me," he said, "why are you married to a man like Tom Pike? 'Cause I've only known you an hour, and I can tell you deserve better." She flinched at Tom's name but didn't look away. Instead, she drew in a breath and stared past him into the dark, like she had to see the story in the air before she could pull it into words. "You said it yourself," she murmured. "My father's land sits by the pass. It's the only easy way through that stretch of hills for miles, and we have the only spring that runs most of the year. Travelers, drovers, wagon trains, they all cut through Byrne land if they want to live." There was no pride in her voice, only a tired knowledge. "When I was little, Pa always said God had blessed us and cursed us at the same time. Blessing was the water. Curse was that every man with a big idea or a gun decided we were his business." She plucked at her skirt, fingers tracing the dusty fabric, and went on. "When Pike came with his men, we thought he was just another bully. Only he wasn't. He had papers, and men in suits from the railroad, and the sheriff at his elbow smiling like this was all fine and proper." Billy could see it now. Malcolm Pike, the name he'd heard in the saloon murmurs, dressed up in respectability like a wolf in a Sunday coat. "Malcolm," Billy said softly. "Tom's daddy." Nora's eyes flicked to his, surprised he knew. He shrugged. "Men like that always make folks talk." "He said the railroad was coming," Nora continued. "That they'd decided on a route, and the pass cut right through our land. They needed the springs for water stops, the right-of-way for tracks, the valley for cattle pens and warehouses. Claimed they'd pay, sure, but only if we signed everything over now, put it in Pike's name so he could manage it. Pa told him no, Said he wasn't handing the land your calloused hands built up to a man who hadn't so much as bucked a bale. Her mouth quirked faintly. She loved her father for that. Billy could see it. And that went over like a lit match in a hay barn, Billy guessed. Pike smiled, she said. A soft little smile like he was sorry for us. He said things were changing, that the valley needed proper order, that the days of small men with small farms standing in the way of progress were over. Then he had his men show their guns. Sheriff was there too, hand resting nice and easy on his own. Pa's hands shook for the first time in my life when he signed that paper giving half the land and control of the pass and spring over to Pike. They left us with the house and a few acres like it was a kindness. Her throat worked. He said it was temporary. Said once things were settled, we'd get our share. But he wanted more? He wanted me, Nora whispered. Said if his boy Tom married into the family, then everything would look respectable. Said it'd look better to the railroad if they saw one big Pike Byrne holding instead of some poor Irish farmer who could barely sign his own name. He told my father. He told him if I didn't marry Tom, he couldn't guarantee anyone would be around to enjoy even the scraps we had left. Her voice broke for a moment, and she swallowed it back. Billy pictured Malcolm Pike, leaning back in a padded chair in an office that smelled of varnish and cigar smoke, making calculations that involved flesh and blood like they were numbers on a slate. "So your father let him sell you for your own life," Billy said quietly. "No," she snapped, then recoiled at her own sharpness. "No," she repeated, softer. "Pa begged. He cried, Billy. I never saw him cry, not once, not even when Ma died. He told me I could say no, but I saw the men stretching their fingers on their guns behind Pike, and I knew if I did, there'd be a lot of bodies in our yard before sundown." She looked him dead in the eye then, and there was steel under the hurt in her gaze. "I made the choice. I walked down that aisle to Tom Pike because it was the only way I knew to keep my father breathing." Billy felt something twist in his chest. He knew all about bad choices made with a gun pointed somewhere just out of sight. "Doesn't mean you're bound to keep paying," he said. "Men like Pike think fear lasts forever. Sometimes it only lasts until somebody gets tired of shaking." A tiny, disbelieving smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "And are you the someone who got tired, Billy?" He opened his mouth to answer, but a flicker caught his eye. Down the arroyo, where the walls opened back toward the main road, a faint, bobbing light danced against the dark. Another, and another. Lanterns. Riders. Billy's body reacted before his thoughts fully caught up. He kicked dirt over the fire, grinding the embers dead with the heel of his boot until the clearing was plunged into darkness, broken only by the distant lantern glow. "On your feet," he hissed, grabbing Nora's hand and pulling her up. "Come on." "What is it?" she whispered, stumbling after him. "Trouble wearing saddles," he muttered. "We gotta get higher." He led her up the side of the arroyo, boots scrabbling on rock, fingers grabbing at scrub and roots. They climbed until they reached a shelf of dirt and stone high enough to look down on the dry creek bed below. Billy pushed her gently behind a boulder, then flattened beside her, peering over the edge. Hoofbeats thudded closer, accompanied by the jingle of tack, low curses, the creak of leather. Then the lanterns appeared, half a dozen at least, swinging from hands or hooked to saddles. Tom Pike rode at their head, his injured wrist wrapped in a dirty bandage, jaw set in a grim line. The men behind him wore the same kind of look Billy had seen in posse riders and hired guns all over the territory. A mix of boredom, malice, and the occasional flicker of doubt. "Fan out," Tom barked, voice echoing off the arroyo walls. "They didn't get this far without leaving tracks. That little bitch knows these backways. She's not going to slip me again." One of the riders, an older man with a drooping mustache, shifted uneasily. "Tom, maybe we give it till sunup and then report back to your pa. He'll send more men. No sense wearing out good horses over one girl and some drifter." Tom wheeled his horse around on him so fast the lantern on his saddle swung wild. "That one girl is my wife," he snarled. "And that drifter shot me, Caleb. Pa loses face if word gets around he let that stand. We find them. We finish it." Caleb. That name, Billy filed away, held up his free hand in surrender. All right. Tom pointed roughly toward where the road cut south.
"We'll watch every trail out of town," he shouted, so his words carried. "We got men at the river crossing and on the rail spur. I don't care how good that kid is, there's only so many ways you can run. This valley's ours now. They'll show themselves sooner or later, and when they do..." He let the threat hang in the air. Nora's hand had found Billy's in the dark. Her fingers squeezed so hard it hurt, and he squeezed back, silently. Below, the riders fanned out, lantern light chasing shadows up and down the arroyo. For one sick moment, Billy thought they'd spot the dim patch where their own fire had been, the faint haze where smoke still lingered. But the wind was with them tonight, carrying the last trace away up the ridge. After a tense few minutes that stretched like hours, Tom cursed and jerked his reins. "Nothing," he spat. "We keep circling. They gotta be between town and the pass somewhere, and we got men at both." He raised his voice again. "Hear me, you two!" he yelled into the empty night, head tilting like he really believed the dark could answer. "You don't have anywhere to go. You can run circles till your shoes wear through, and it won't change a damn thing. The town's ours, the sheriff's ours, the land's ours. You'll come crawling back or you'll die tired." With that, he yanked his horse around and kicked it into a canter, his men following, lanterns bobbing away like angry stars. Billy waited until the last glimmer of light had vanished and the sound of hooves was swallowed by the distance. Only then did he let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Nora's shoulders sagged. "He's right," she whispered, voice trembling. "We don't have anywhere to go. My father's under his thumb at the ranch. The town belongs to the Pikes. The law might as well be their hired hand. You should have let him hit me and walked away, Billy. You know that?" "I've walked away from enough things," he said quietly. "Most of them haunt me when I try to sleep. I'm not keen on adding you to the list." "So what do we do?" she asked. "We find out exactly what we're up against," he said, "and then we hit it where it hurts." She gave a bitter laugh. "You and what army?" "Working on that part," he said, a small smile tugging at his mouth despite the danger. "Come on, I know a line shack tucked into those foothills. You can rest there, maybe send word to your pa if we're careful. I'll pay a visit to your new in-laws." "To Pike?" There was raw fear in that question. "That's suicide." "Not if he doesn't know I'm there," Billy said, "or if he doesn't recognize me while I am." She frowned. "Who are you, really?" The firelight at the saloon might have hidden it, but the starlight didn't. She took in the young face under the hat, the quick hands, the easy way he held himself, and something like realization flickered in her eyes. "You're Billy the Kid," she breathed. He winced. He never much liked hearing it out loud, not from people he didn't mean to scare.
"Some folks use that name," he said. "Some others use worse. All you need to know is I've made a career out of slipping through tight places, and your friend Tom doesn't scare me near as much as the post apprentice."
She took that in, weighing fear against a glimmer of hope that hadn't been there an hour ago. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said. "Go pick a fight with the devil himself then. Just come back, Billy. Don't make me explain to my father that I got the only man willing to help me killed." "I'll do my best," he said. And that was all he ever promised anyone. He got her settled in the derelict line shack as dawn pinked the eastern horizon, a one-room affair left over from some cattle outfit long gone bust, with a sagging cot and a roof that only leaked when the rain tried hard. He left her his spare pistol and showed her how to aim it, how to breathe before she squeezed the trigger. She listened hard, jaw set, and he saw again the steel under the bruises. Then he saddled up Malachi and rode for town with the first light, dust pluming behind him as the desert woke. He didn't go back to his favorite saloon, Not yet. Instead, he cut around the edges of town to a lower, rougher establishment tucked behind the freight yards, a place with a crooked sign that read, "Coyote's Prayer," and windows so dirty you couldn't tell if the sun was up when you sat inside. It was there he knew he'd find Rosa. Rosa had been serving drinks to men with more money than morals since before Billy had started shaving. She'd poured him whiskey in half a dozen towns under half a dozen names, and if anyone in this place knew where Malcolm Pike kept his darkest secrets, it would be her. The bar was mostly empty that time of day. A couple of miners dozing over their beer and a card sharp sorting a deck in the corner like he was practicing a sermon. Rosa stood behind the bar, polishing a glass with a rag that only moved the dirt around. Her black hair was pinned high, a few strands escaping, and her eyes took in everything, including the way Billy held himself as he stepped inside. "You're either a fool or you're desperate, coming back here after last night," she said without greeting, her accent still thick with the Mexican borderlands. "Tom's been storming around like a bull with a horn broken off. He's telling anyone who'll listen he's going to mount your hide on his father's wall." "He'll have to catch me first," Billy said, sliding onto a stool. "Coffee, if you have it, and news." She snorted, but poured him a tin cup of something that had once been close to coffee. "News is, you picked the wrong girl to play hero over," she said, leaning in. "Pike's boy has other women he slaps around. Bartender's wife, seamstress on the corner, little thing who works at the hotel. The town looks away. But this one? The railway men know her name now. They were at the wedding."
Malcolm made sure of it. "She's not just a wife. She's a symbol he can waggle at men in suits to prove he owns the valley. You took his symbol. He won't like that." "I noticed," Billy said dryly. He took a sip and grimaced. "You hear anything about why he's so set on Byrne land? Beyond the railroad story they tell in church?" Rosa's eyes flicked toward the door by habit, then back. "They got more going on out there than tracks and cows," she said in a low voice. "Warehouse going up behind the main house, wagons rolling in at night, crates marked with army stamps and bank seals going in, plain wooden boxes coming out. Men with fancy watches and guns that match. They say Malcolm's just getting ready for the railroad boom, stocking goods. But I hear things when men drink and talk too loud." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "They're laundering stolen money and goods, Billy. Robbed payrolls, silver from the mines in the hills, bonds taken off trains. They run it all through the valley. On paper, it all belongs to Pike Freight and cattle. The spring waters the herds that don't exist. The pass carries the wagons. By the time it reaches the railroad, it all looks clean. And if anyone asks, Malcolm shows them a ledger thick as a Bible that says every cent is honest." Billy whistled softly. It was bigger than he'd guessed. Not just one crooked rancher, but a whole empire of theft dressed up as progress. "And the law?" he asked, though he already knew. "The law likes a slice of pie," Rosa said, "and Malcolm knows exactly how to cut it." "Where's the main warehouse?" Billy asked. "If I wanted to see just how much pie he's got baking." Rosa hesitated, eyes searching his face. "You going to burn it down?" He shrugged. "Maybe just poke a few holes in it." She sighed. "Behind the old mission on the hill," she said finally. "They gutted the church for storage and added more sheds behind it. Malcolm's there most afternoons, counting his blessings. But Billy..." "Yeah?" "You ain't bulletproof," she said. "Pike has men who ain't afraid of your name. Men who killed just as quick for less reason." "I know," he said quietly. "But I owe a girl with freckles and her father a little trouble in their favor." She shook her head at him like he was a lost cause, but there was a flicker of fondness in her eyes. "Then go," she said, "before the wrong ears hear you asking the wrong questions." He went. The old mission sat on a low rise above town, its bell tower long since crumbled, adobe walls stained with dust and time.
Once, it had been a place where men whispered to God. Now it kept company with wagons and armed guards. Billy scoped it from the cover of a mesquite thicket, watching the pattern of men on the grounds, the way they walked their rounds, where the shadows gathered deepest. He waited until a freight wagon creaked up the slope, the guards at the gate focusing on checking its contents and hollering at the driver. Then he slipped from cover and moved, quick and low, using the wagon's bulk as a shield. While the guards argued about manifests, he slid under the wagon, dust filling his nose and mouth, and rolled at the far side into the darker shadow along the mission wall. A low door stood half open near the back, where the plaster had cracked and fallen away. He slipped through it, finding himself in a cool, dim corridor that still smelled faintly of incense under the overlay of gun oil and flour dust. Voices echoed from the main room where the congregation had once knelt. He followed the sound, keeping to the edges until he reached a doorway and peered in. The nave was filled with crates, stacked to the rafters, their markings catching shafts of light from the high windows. Bank seals, Army eagles, railroad logos. Men in shirt sleeves moved through the aisles between them, noting things in ledgers, prying open lids to check contents. At the far end, where an altar once stood, a long table had been set up. Malcolm Pike sat there, chair tilted back, boots up on a crate. His hair and beard were well trimmed, shot with dignified gray, his vest stretched slightly over a comfortable belly. He held a cigar with lazy ownership, smoke curling above him like a private cloud. Next to him stood Caleb, the rider from the night before, his mustache drooping more now in the daylight, a rifle resting in his arms like it belonged there. "The Byrne girl ran," Malcolm was saying, voice smooth and controlled. "My boy tells me a certain young man encouraged that. That's a problem." "We'll find them," Caleb said. "Tom's angry, but he ain't stupid. He knows we can't afford to let anyone make us look weak, least of all in front of the railroad men." "Tom has his uses," Malcolm said dryly. "Temperament is not one of them. Still, a little fear in town might do us good. Remind people who keeps the wolves from their doors." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Thought we were the wolves." Malcolm smiled thinly. "Wolves with paperwork," he said. "A rare breed." The men around him laughed obligingly. Malcolm jerked his cigar toward a stack of crates. "How many?" he asked. "Between the silver and the payrolls, we're sitting on a small country's treasury," Caleb said. "Once the railroad comes through officially and your son's marriage looks nice and settled, we start moving it east like we planned. Legitimate shipments, insured and everything. Banks will thank us for doing their job better than they do." Malcolm's eyes gleamed. "And Byrne's land?" "Once we get the last papers signed," Caleb said, "you'll own everything from the spring to the far ridge outright. Girl helps keep Daddy Byrne quiet. Tom keeps his hands off her face long enough for the railroad man to see them at church together. We're golden. After that," he shrugged, "accidents happen on ranches. Widows remarry." Malcolm's fingers tightened slightly on his cigar. "No," he said. "No more loose ends than we already have." He told her about the mission, the crates, the laundering. He told her about Malcolm's plans for her father, for the ranch, if she didn't fall in line. As he spoke, her face went from pale to something else. The fear didn't leave, but it made room for anger, for a stubborn set to her jaw that reminded him of stories he'd heard about Irish women standing in front of thatched cottages as soldiers marched up. "So we're not just up against one bad man," she said, voice steady in its way. "We're sitting on the hinge of a whole rotten door." "Something like that," he said, "which means running won't fix it. We could ride south, cross into Mexico, disappear for a while. But Malcolm will set fire to your home and call it justice. He'll use your father's land to clean every piece of stolen blood money he can get his hands on, and the railroad will smile and shake his hand." Nora looked past him, eyes distant, seeing smoke where it hadn't risen yet. "I won't leave my father," she said. "I won't leave our land to be turned into a wash basin for men like that. If I have to die on that dirt, I'd rather do it with my eyes open. Billy studied her. That what you want? He asked quietly. To go back and fight? She met his gaze. There was fear there, and grief, but underneath it, an unshakable core. I don't know what I want, she admitted. I wanted a life where I married a man I could stand the sight of. I wanted my father to live out his days watching calves grow fat. I wanted my mother to still be alive and singing in the kitchen. I don't get those things. But I know this. I don't want to be the kind of woman who spends the rest of her life wondering if she could have done something and chose not to. Do you understand? He did. Every scar on his soul was a story about something he'd done or hadn't done. Then we fight, he said simply. But we don't fight alone. He told her, in broad strokes, about Jesse James, about the message. Her eyes widened. You called one outlaw to fight another, she said. That's like pouring whiskey on a fire. Sometimes the fire's already hot enough, it doesn't matter, he said. Jesse won't come because he cares about you or Byrne Springs. He'll come because Malcolm has more gold and bonds sitting in that mission than a dozen trains. And because hitting a man like Pike makes a good story to tell over campfires. But he'll come. He likes a challenge. How do we know he will? She asked. We don't, Billy said honestly. But men like him don't ignore opportunity. If he rides within 2 days, we can meet him in the Badlands, by the North Pass. If he doesn't show, we think of something else. Either way, we don't sit still and wait for Pike to find us. The 2 days that followed stretched and snapped and stretched again. They camped closer to the pass, in a narrow canyon where rock walls rose steep and the sky was a thin ribbon overhead. Billy used the time to teach Nora more than just how to hold a pistol. He put a Winchester in her hands, showed her how to work the lever, how to line up the sights. Her first shot went wide, kicking up dust a yard from the rock he'd pointed to. She cursed under her breath, cheeks flushing. You don't have to be gentle when you miss, he said, amused. The bullet already left you. She glared at him, then squared her shoulders. Her second shot hit closer. The third chipped the edge of the rock. By the sixth, she rang it clean. Each time the recoil rocked her slight frame, but she adjusted, learned, grew steadier. He watched the way her hair came loose as she worked, strands glinting copper in the sun, sweat beading at her temples. He watched the freckles on her nose darken a shade under the harsh light. She was beautiful, yes, but that wasn't the whole of it. She was becoming formidable, and that stirred something deep in him that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with a hunger to see one good thing in this country: stand up straight and not get knocked down. At night, they sat by a small sheltered fire, speaking low. He told her pieces of his own story, the ones that didn't end in blood on a dusty floor. The boy named Henry, who'd become a legend he didn't quite recognize. The rustled cattle, the war in Lincoln County that had chewed up better men than him. She listened without judgment, though sometimes her eyes went sad at the edges. Once, when the wind shifted and cold came slinking down the canyon, she inched closer to the fire and shivered. He shrugged off his coat and handed it to her. You'll freeze, she protested. I got used to the cold a long time ago, he said. Besides, I got more scars. They keep you warm. That made her laugh, a real sound this time, not scraping over tears. Is that how it works? Might be, he said. You're on your way then. She slipped into the coat, its weight and worn wool wrapping her in his leftover warmth. For a moment, under the starlight, with the canyon walls holding back the world, it felt like there were only the two of them, a small island of heat in a sea of unforgiving land. Her shoulder brushed his. She tilted her head back to look at the band of stars overhead. Do you ever want to just stop? She asked softly. All the running, all the fighting. He was quiet a moment. Sometimes, he said. Then I remember the law doesn't forget faces like mine. Usually, by the time a man like me wants to sit in a rocking chair, his past is already on its way with a noose. That's not an answer, she said. "It's the only one I've got," he replied. She turned her head. In the flicker of the fire, her freckles stood out like constellations of their own. Her gaze lingered on his mouth for a heartbeat, just long enough that he felt his own pulse pick up. He could have leaned in then, could have taken what was being offered in that sliver of shared breath and heat. Instead, he looked away at the fire. He wasn't sure if that was mercy or cowardice. Jesse came with the dawn of the third day. They heard them before they saw them, the steady, confident drum of hooves, not hurried, like a posse, not shambling like cowhands. Outlaws rode with a particular rhythm, some mix of arrogance and readiness. Billy moved ahead to the mouth of the canyon, hand resting easy on his colt as 4 riders came into view. Jesse James led them, hat tipped low, duster flapping. His hair and beard had darkened a bit with age, since Kansas, but his eyes were the same sharp, restless blue, always measuring angles and exits. Frank James rode beside him, lean and watchful, and behind them, 2 others, one with a scar from ear to chin, another smoking lazily, even in the saddle. Jesse reined in when he saw Billy, a slow grin spreading under his mustache. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "Thought I was answering a ghost's call. You got harder to track than a fair sheriff." "You got my note," Billy said. "Hard to resist when someone tells you there's river gold and paper clothes sitting in one place," Jesse replied. "Even harder when they tell you the man guarding it thinks he owns the law. That's the kind of insult makes a body itchy." His gaze flicked past Billy to where Nora stood, her little back, rifle tucked against her side, hair blowing loose. "And who's the lady?" he asked, a hint of curiosity under the charm. "Nora Byrne," Billy said. "Her father's land is what Malcolm Pike's using to wash his sins. Tom Pike's her doting husband." Jesse's lips curled. "Tom and Malcolm Pike," he mused. "Heard the names, heard they were turning this valley into their own little kingdom. Guess we'll see how well kingdoms float." He swung down from his horse, dust puffing up around his boots. "All right, kid, you called me in. What's the play?" Billy laid it out. The mission warehouse, the crates, the evidence, the pass, the ranch. Jesse listened, hands on his hips, occasionally glancing at the canyon walls as if testing them for worth as cover. When Billy finished, he was silent for a long moment, tongue chewing the inside of his cheek. "We hit their wagon train in the pass," Jesse said finally. "They'll have to move that treasure if they want it laundered. You say they're dressing the stolen goods up as regular freight, sending them east. They won't keep it all in that mission forever. We find out when the big shipment leaves. We take it in the tight ground where numbers don't matter so much. Then we make sure Malcolm Pike's ledger disappears, or appears in the wrong hands. Without those papers, he's just another thief with a fancy hat." "He'll still have the sheriff and half the town," Nora said quietly. Jesse's gaze slid to her. "Then we make it so half the town is too scared or too proud to ride with him," he said. "Nothing like seeing a king bleed to make his followers reconsider their loyalties. And my father," she pressed. "He's at the ranch under watch. Tom will punish him, and me, if he thinks you took his gold." "We don't give Tom time to think," Billy said. "We hit the wagons, then we drive straight for Byrne Springs, while Pike's men are scrambling to figure out what happened. We put guns in your father's hands, and in every farmhand who's tired of being told where to spit." "You sure they'll stand with us?" Jess asked. Billy thought of the men's faces in town, the way they'd watched Tom shove Nora, the way their eyes had slid away. Fear was a heavy chain, but chains rusted when you beat on them long enough. "I'm not sure of much," he said, "but I've seen men stand up when the ground under them starts to burn." Jesse grinned, showing teeth. "Then let's strike a match." Getting the timing took another day of careful watching. Billy and Jesse's men shadowed the road near the mission, keeping to hills and scrub. Finally, on a cloudless morning, they saw it, a line of 3 heavy wagons, each pulled by 4 big horses, creaking out of the mission's yard with armed riders at their flanks. Malcolm himself didn't ride with them, Kings preferred to sit in safety, but Caleb did. And Tom, his wrist still bandaged, but his mouth twisted in an eager snarl. The Pikes weren't sending their gold off without family eyes on it. The convoy headed toward the North Pass, the wagons groaning under the weight of stolen fortunes, turned respectable freight. Billy and Jesse watched from a high ridge as they entered the narrowest part of the canyon, where the walls closed in tight and the sky overhead was a thin strip of blue. Now, Jesse said. His men were already in place. They'd spent the night planting dynamite in cracks in the rock, anchoring each stick with care, running fuses back to sheltered positions. As the lead wagon entered the pinch point, one of Jesse's men sparked the fuse. The explosion wasn't huge, not enough to bury the wagons, but it shook the ground like the stomp of a giant. Rocks shattered loose from the canyon wall, tumbling down in a thunderous cascade just ahead of the convoy, blocking the path forward with a tangle of boulders and dust. The lead horses screamed and reared. The wagon behind slammed into their halted backs with a crash. Men shouted, guns half drawn, eyes scanning the ridges for an enemy they couldn't yet see. That was when Billy stood up on the ridge, Colt in one hand, rifle slung across his back, silhouetted against the sun. "Morning, Tom," he called, the wind carrying his voice down. "You and your friends lost." Tom whipped around, face going from surprise to pure hatred in a heartbeat. "You," he snarled, "shoot him." But before his men could take proper aim, Jesse's boys opened up from both sides of the canyon, rifle fire crackling in a deadly crossfire. Bullets pinged off rock and tore into wagon wood. One guard spun and toppled from his saddle, another dove for cover behind a wheel. Caleb shouted orders, trying to form a defensive ring, but the narrow canyon left little room to maneuver. "Take the high ones," he bellowed, firing up at the ridge where Billy had stood. Billy had already dropped, rolling behind a rock, just as splinters puffed from the spot he'd vacated. He edged along the rim, picking his shots, putting bullets where they tore through hat brims and gun hands, rather than hearts when he could manage it. Jesse was less particular. He moved like he was dancing, popping up to fire, ducking back with a laugh. "Come on, boys," he hollered. "Pike's paying us today whether he likes it or not." Below, Tom tried to push his horse forward, only to have it balk at the rockfall. He wheeled around, looking for an opening, for someone to charge. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him half out of the saddle. He roared in pain and fury, firing wildly up at the ridges, hitting nothing but air and stone. Caleb saw the writing on the wall faster. He grabbed the reins of one of the wagons, slapping the horses into backing up. "Fall back," he yelled. "Use the bend for cover." They started to retreat, dragging the wagons with them, but it was chaos. Men shouted, horses screamed, a wheel hit a rock and cracked, sending one wagon listing dangerously. Jesse's men kept up the fire, their position on the heights giving them a cruel advantage. Amid the noise and dust, Billy dropped down a goat path carved by water and time, landing hard in the scree near the back wagon. A guard turned, eyes going wide as he recognized the grin under the hat. "The kid," he started, and then Billy's pistol cracked once, dropping him before he finished. Billy ducked under the wagon, emerged on the far side, and scrambled up onto the driver's seat. "Appreciate the loan," he said to no one, snapping the reins. The startled team surged forward, dragging the wagon away from the others. Bullets whined, some coming uncomfortably close. He steered the wagon toward a small cut he'd noticed in the canyon wall earlier, a little sidewash that might, with luck, lead to a hiding place. "Frank," Jesse shouted from the ridge. "Cover the kid." Frank James shifted his fire, calmly picking off the worst threats around Billy as he drove. Within minutes, the wagon was rattling into the sidewash, hidden from direct sight of the main fight. Jesse peeled another of his men off the ridge to follow Billy down, covering the approach. The ambush was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Seeing one of their wagons peeled away, and another stuck against a rock, Caleb made the call to save who he could. He signaled retreat, and the surviving guards spurred their horses hard, dragging the remaining wagon around the bend and out of the canyon in a cloud of dust. Tom, bleeding and wild-eyed, twisted in his saddle, firing one last furious volley back up at the ridges. "You're dead, kid," he screamed. "You hear me? I'll hang you myself." His words bounced off stone and died in the air. Billy, busy getting his stolen wagon to safer ground, didn't bother to answer. When the dust settled, Jesse and his men came pounding into the sidewash, faces bright with adrenaline and greed. They pried open the crates in the stolen wagon, whistling low at the sight of neatly stacked bars of silver, bundles of banknotes, military payroll packets, even a small chest of gold coins. "Well now," Jesse said, "you weren't exaggerating." Billy's gaze, though, wasn't on the money. It was on one smaller crate, tucked in a corner, marked with Pike's personal seal. He broke it open and rifled through the papers inside. Deeds, contracts, bond certificates, and there, wrapped in oilcloth, the ledger. Page after page of careful handwriting, detailing every transaction Malcolm had made, every stolen dollar disguised as freight revenue, every land transfer, including the one stamped with Byrne's shaky signature. Billy tore that page free and folded it. The rest he set back carefully. "What are you doing?" Jesse asked. "We should burn that, make sure it can't hurt anyone." "We're going to use it first," Billy said. "Then you can burn it on some lucky night." He tucked the burn deed into his coat. "We can't stay here. Caleb will regroup, and Malcolm will send more men. We take what we can haul on horseback and go." Jesse frowned. "I'm not leaving a whole wagon of gold behind." "You will if you want to live to spend the part you keep," Billy shot back. "We didn't come here to die over a few extra pounds of someone else's greed." The logic was solid, and Jesse was no fool. They stripped the most valuable and portable pieces, stuffing saddlebags and slinging wrapped bundles across spare horses. The rest they left hidden in the sidewash for another day, if fate allowed. Then they rode hard for Byrne Springs. The ranch lay quiet under the afternoon sun when they crested the last rise overlooking the valley. The whitewashed house sat like a tired old man at the center of a ring of corrals and outbuildings, smoke from the kitchen chimney rising lazy. Men moved about the yard, some with rifles slung. The Byrne brand marked the cattle in the near pasture, but Pike's mark might as well have been branded on the air. Billy felt Nora tense beside him. "He's there," she whispered. "My father. I can feel it." "You'll see him soon," Billy said. One way or another, they split their little force. Jesse and two of his men swung wide to come in from the north, cutting off any escape. Billy, Nora, and the rest rode straight down the main track like they owned it. Near the house, a guard saw them and shouted, raising his rifle. "Hold there." "Who?" Nora kicked her horse forward before Billy could answer. Her hair whipped back, coat flaring, freckles bright on her pale, set face. "You going to shoot your boss's daughter-in-law, Rafe?" she called. The guard froze. "Nora," he said, disbelief thick. "Tom said you ran." "Tom says a lot of things," she cut in. "Most of them lies. Where's my father?" "Inside," Rafe stammered, glancing nervously at the rifles aimed from behind Nora. "Pike said he was not to leave the house till Tom came back." "Then you tell Pike he should have locked his doors better," she snapped, riding past him. Billy gestured with his gun at the remaining hands. "Any of you that feels like dying for Malcolm Pike can draw on us," he said. "Any of you that's just been working for wages, step aside, and we'll pretend we didn't notice." Men exchanged looks. One or two tightened their grips on their rifles, then thought better of it, and let them drop, backing away. Fear and hunger had put them in Pike's employ. Neither was worth catching bullets over. Billy and Nora dismounted at the front steps. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old cooking. They found Eamon Byrne in the parlor, sitting stiff in a chair under a faded painting. His hair had grayed almost to white, his face lined and leathered, but his hands were still thick and calloused. At the sight of his daughter, he lurched to his feet, eyes filling with tears. "Nora," he said, voice breaking. "Sweet Mary, child, I thought." She crossed the space between them in 3 steps and fell into his arms, careful of his ribs. He held her like a man clinging to the last piece of wreckage after a shipwreck. "Pa," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "For what?" he asked, pulling back to search her face.
For doing what you had to do. For being braver than me." He cupped her bruised cheek with a thumb that shook. "I let them tie you to that man, thinking I could bear the shame if it meant you lived. I never thought he'd treat you like this." He looked past her then, to Billy, who stood in the doorway. "This the one?" he asked. "The boy who raised his hand when I was too much a coward." Billy shifted, uncomfortable. "Just happened to be walking out of a saloon at the right time," he said. "I've done enough wrong that one right thing doesn't put me ahead." Eamon snorted. "You sound like a man who knows his own ledger," he said. "I can respect that. What's your plan, son?" "Right now," Billy said. "Brace this place for a fight. We hit Pike's convoy. They'll be hurting, and when men like that hurt, they bite." As if summoned by the words, a shout went up outside. Jesse burst through the open front door, rifle in hand, dust in his beard. "We got riders coming in from town," he said. "Plenty of them. Malcolm and his boy leading the parade." "How many?" Billy asked. "Enough to make this interesting," Jesse said, grin sharp. "You ready to make a stand, Farmer Byrne?" Eamon looked at his daughter, saw the way she stood now, rifle steady, chin lifted. He nodded once, as if deciding something deep inside. "I was ready the day they walked up my drive with the law and the devil at their back," he said. "Didn't have the spine to show it. Guess I do now." The Byrne ranch became a fortress in minutes. They moved wagons to block the main approach, stacked feed sacks into shooting rests, stationed hands with rifles at windows and along the low rock wall near the corrals. A few of Pike's former men, seeing which way the wind was blowing, and remembering every slight Malcolm had dealt them, quietly took places alongside the Byrnes, not opposite. Nora took position on the front porch, where she could see the yard and the road beyond, Billy at her side. "You sure about this?" he asked her. She gave him a sideways look that was almost a smile. "No," she said. "But I'm sure I'm done hiding in back rooms, while men decide what happens to me." Hoofbeats rolled closer like distant thunder. Malcolm Pike rode at the head of his little army, suit replaced by a dust-stained coat, but his posture still that of a man confident in his power. Tom rode beside him, arms still bandaged, face pale with rage and loss. The sheriff trailed a little behind, hat pulled low over his eyes, like he wanted to be anywhere else. They reined in just beyond rifle range, surveying the barricades, the rifles glinting in the late light. Malcolm's gaze landed on Nora. And for the first time Billy saw something like surprise.
You crack the smooth mask. "Nora," Malcolm called. "Come down from there, girl. Don't make this worse than it has to be." She stepped to the edge of the porch, rifle held easy but ready. "Worse for who?" she called back. "For you? For my father, who you turned into a tenant on his own land. For me, who you sold like a broodmare to your son." Tom jerked in his saddle. "You're my wife," he shouted. "You belong." "I belong to no man who raises his hand to me," she cut in, voice ringing. "You think a ring and a witness give you rights over my skin? You're a fool twice over, Tom Pike." A murmur rippled through the men on both sides. Some of Pike's riders shifted in their saddles, not quite comfortable with what they were hearing. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "You've been keeping a poor house, Byrne," he called to Eamon. "Letting your daughter fill her head with ideas that'll get her killed. My daughter's got more sense in her little finger than you got in that whole fat head, Malcolm." Eamon shot back from his spot at the corner of the house, rifle resting on the windowsill. "She's worth 10 of you." Malcolm's jaw hardened. He gestured with his hand. "You think a few farmhands and some outlaw trash can hold this place?" he asked. "Look around you. This town, this valley, the law, they all move with me. I built roads here. I'm bringing the railroad. I'm the only thing standing between this dirt and chaos." Billy stepped forward then, tipping his hat back just enough that the men below could see his face clearly. A ripple passed through them as recognition set in. "Far as I can tell, Mr. Pike," he said, "you are the chaos. You just wrote it down in a nice ledger." Malcolm's eyes flashed. "Billy the Kid," he said. The name like a curse and a sneer together. "You think being good with a gun makes you some kind of savior?" "No," Billy said. "It just keeps me alive long enough to do one or two things that matter." He pulled out the folded page from his coat and held it up. "Got something of yours," he said. "Byrne's deed. signed under duress, and your ledger's got enough dirty lines in it to keep the governor's office reading for years, if someone chose to deliver it. For the first time, Malcolm looked uncertain. "You're bluffing," he said. "You won't live long enough to ride to the capital." "Maybe not," Billy said. "But I bet some of your men down there are wondering what happens when your pretty house of lies falls and they're left holding the bag. You think all of them want to go to prison because you liked stealing payrolls?" He let his gaze travel over the assembled riders. He saw it land on faces, doubt the tiniest seed. Jesse picked up the thread from his perch on the barn roof. "Tell you what, boys," he called. "Any of you that ride away now, we'll call it square. You stay on Pike's side, you take your chances with him when the smoke clears. You ride out, we won't chase you, and if we ever meet again, we'll pretend we never saw you here. Your choice." The sheriff shifted in his saddle, hand worrying at the badge on his chest. He looked at Malcolm, at Billy, at Nora. Then, slowly, he reached up, unclipped the badge, and let it fall into the dust. "I signed up to keep drunks from shooting each other in the street," he said, loud enough to carry. "Not to help steal a man's land and beat his daughter. Malcolm, you're on your own." He wheeled his horse and trotted away. A handful of riders went with him, some quickly, some after a moment of tortured indecision. Malcolm watched them go with a face like carved stone. When the dust of their departure settled, enough men still flanked him to make the air heavy with threat. "Fine," he said. "Those who remain are loyal. That's all I need." He raised his hand. "Kill them all." The world exploded into sound. Gunfire thundered from both sides. Bullets snapped through air, pinged off wood, tore chips from stone. A man near Malcolm jerked and slid from his saddle, tumbling to the ground. One of Byrne's hands cried out from a window, clutching his shoulder. Nora sighted carefully along her rifle barrel, the world narrowing to her breath, her heartbeat, the small circle of Malcolm's broad chest in the smoky distance. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Malcolm's hat flew from his head, a neat hole appearing in the crown. He jerked instinctively, then looked up at her, shock and fury battling in his eyes. "You little," he started. Caleb dragged him back behind a horse. "Stay down," he shouted. "You're too valuable a target." Tom, meanwhile, spurred his horse toward the barricade, firing wildly. "Nora," he screamed. "You come down here right now. You hear me?" A bullet chewed the edge of the porch near her boots. Billy grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "He'll kill you if he gets close," he said. "Let him try from out there." Tom drove his horse closer, nearly to the wagons, ignoring the bullets snapping around him. He lifted his pistol, aiming not at Billy, but straight at Nora. Billy saw the moment in his eyes, knew there was no warning in them, only the kind of simple, cold decision that ended lives. He moved without thinking. His shoulder slammed into Nora, knocking her sideways as Tom fired. The bullet seared across Billy's ribs, a line of white-hot fire. He grunted, staggered, but kept his feet. Nora, half fallen, rolled, the rifle clutched awkwardly to her chest. She saw Tom's face above her, contorted with triumph, and something like disappointment that she wasn't already dead. She saw his gun hand rising again, and something in her snapped into perfect razor clarity. She planted the butt of the rifle against her hip, aimed from the ground up, and fired. The shot took Tom in the chest, just off center, slamming him back in the saddle. His mouth opened in a surprised "oh," more boy than monster for a single instant. Then he toppled backward, hitting the ground with a dull thud, and lying still, dust blooming around him like a final exhale. The battlefield stuttered. Men saw Tom fall, some shouted his name. Malcolm, peeking from behind a horse, saw his son's body, and made a sound that was too raw to be dignified. Pride and cruelty aside, he had loved that boy in his hard way. With a wordless roar, he snatched a rifle from one of his men, and stood fully, taking aim at the porch, where Nora still lay half exposed. Billy, blood soaking his shirt above the hip, saw it too. Time slowed. He could have dropped, could have dragged Nora fully behind cover, could have tried to put a bullet in Malcolm first. He chose the one thing his body had always known best. He stepped into the line of fire. Malcolm's rifle thundered. Billy fired at the same moment. The recoil bit his already burning side. He felt the impact of Malcolm's bullet, like the kick of a mule, spinning him, knocking the breath from his lungs. He went down to one knee, vision going narrow.
The field, Malcolm staggered, clutching his shoulder where Billy's shot had punched through. He reeled, dropped the rifle, and crumpled against the flank of his horse, sliding down into the dust. The men around him faltered. Their leader lay groaning. Their favored son was still on his back, staring glassy-eyed at the sky. Jesse, sensing the moment, leapt from the barn roof, landing in the yard with the easy grace of a cat. He fired 2 quick shots, one into the air, one into a man who'd kept shooting despite it all. "That's enough," he shouted. "You can keep bleeding for a man who won't be standing when the sun sets, or you can drop your guns and walk away. Gold's gone. Ledger's not in his hands anymore. This kingdom's done." One by one, then in clumps, the rifles lowered. Men let them fall, hands raising, backs straightening, as if some terrible weight had slipped from their shoulders. Within minutes, only Malcolm's most fanatical loyalists were still armed, and even they looked shaken. Caleb looked at Malcolm, at Tom, at Billy and Nora on the porch, and something inside him broke. He threw his rifle into the dirt. "It's over, Malcolm," he said quietly. "We rode with you for money. You were never worth dying for." Malcolm tried to speak, blood bubbling at his lips, but whatever words he had died with him. He slumped, eyes staring at nothing, the dust of the Byrne yard rising slowly to settle over his once iron features. The battle was done. Silence seeped in, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the creak of leather. Eamon staggered from his position, dropping his rifle as he hurried toward the porch. Nora scrambled to her feet, ignoring the way her own knees shook, reaching for Billy. He was sitting with his back against a post, one hand clamped to his side, where blood had soaked wintry red through his shirt. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear, watching the sky, as if checking to make sure it was still there. "You idiot," Nora whispered, kneeling beside him. "Stepping in front of bullets that weren't meant for you. Pretty sure that one had my name on it somewhere," he panted, then chuckled, which made him wince. "You shot Tom, you're surprised," she said, tears mixing with dust on her cheeks. "After all your talk about me not shaking anymore?" "Not surprised," he said, impressed. Eamon dropped to his knees on Billy's other side, pressing his rough hand over Billy's. "We got a doctor in town, who doesn't owe Malcolm anything," he said. "We'll get you there, boy. Don't you die in my yard after all this?" "I'll try to be considerate," Billy muttered. Jesse walked up, tipping his hat, blue eyes taking in the scene with something like reluctant respect. "You always throw this much drama into every robbery?" he asked. "Keeps things memorable," Billy said. "You get your share?" Jesse's grin flashed. "Enough to make the ride worth it," he said. "Ledger?" Billy nodded toward the house. "In there under the floorboard by the fireplace." "Deeds in my pocket," Jesse considered. "We'll take what we need to disappear, leave the rest for when some newspapermen come sniffing around," he said. "Nothing like a little light on wrongdoing to make the next pike think twice." He straightened. "You did good, kid. For someone who claims he's no hero." Billy shrugged, wincing again. "I'm still an outlaw," he said. "Don't go putting wings on me." "Don't worry," Jesse said. "Nobody's carving you on a stained glass." He turned to Nora and Eamon. "You two got something now. None of us do. Land that's really yours. No one else's ink on the paper. Malcolm's dead, Tom's dead, and his men'll scatter. You'll have a fight on your hands with every little snake who thinks they can fill the vacuum, but that's true for any place worth owning." Eamon nodded slowly. "We'll be ready," he said. He looked at his daughter, and his eyes shone with pride that cut through the exhaustion and grief. "She'll make sure of it." Nora met his gaze, then looked down at Billy again. Later, when the doctor had come and gone, when the worst of the wounded were bandaged and the dead laid out, when Jesse and his men had ridden off with their laden horses, tips of their hats flashing farewell, the ranch settled into a strange, fragile peace. The sun bled down behind the hills,
painting the sky in streaks of red and gold. Billy sat on the porch, shirt open to avoid the bandages at his side, the ache in his ribs a constant reminder of how close things had come. Nora stepped out beside him, hair loose now, falling around her shoulders in a wave that caught the dying light. The freckles on her cheeks were more pronounced for the day spent in the sun, and the bruises on her face were already fading from purple to yellow. She sank down next to him, their shoulders almost touching. "Doc says you'll live," she said softly. "Says you're too stubborn to do anything else." "Doc's got a sharp eye," Billy replied. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching Eamon across the yard as he talked with a few of the hands, his gestures animated even in his tiredness. "He's proud of you," Billy said. "He told me so when you were still out cold," Nora answered, a little smile ghosting her lips. "Said he never thought he'd see the day I'd outshoot a pike." She drew a breath. "He asked if you were staying." Billy's throat tightened. He'd known this question was coming. He'd been trying not to look it in the eye. "And what'd you tell him?" he asked. "That you probably weren't," she said. "That men like you're like storms. You blow through, you break things that need breaking, and then you move on before folks get used to the rain." He grimaced. "You make me sound romantic," he said. "Trust me, most wanted posters don't." She turned to him, her green eyes serious. "I won't lie," she said. "Part of me wants to ask you to stay, to build something here, to see what you look like in 10 years, when you're not always looking over your shoulder." Her fingers twisted in the fabric of her skirt. "But I've been owned once. I won't own you back by pinning you to a place you can't stand." He studied her face, memorizing the pattern of freckles, the way one sat just a little higher than the rest on her cheekbone. "If I stayed," he said slowly, "Pike might be gone, but there'd always be some ranger, some bounty hunter, some man with a badge and an empty purse sniffing around. They'd bring trouble to your door that makes today look like a Sunday picnic." He looked away, out at the darkening land. "I don't know how long a man like me gets before someone faster or luckier sends him on. But however long it is, I'd rather you weren't in the line of that bullet." "So you'll ride out before dawn," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Probably," he said. "While your father's fussing at the hands and you're pretending to sleep." She laughed softly. "I haven't slept properly in weeks," she said. "You think I'm going to miss you sneaking off?" They sat for a long moment more, the weight of the unsaid humming between them like a plucked wire. Finally Nora shifted, turning fully toward him. She reached up, fingers brushing his jaw, rough with stubble. "You risked your life for me," she said. "Not just in some alleyway in town, but here, when you could have ridden off with Jesse and more money than you'll see again. Tell me that meant something, Billy. Don't make it into just another story you tell over whiskey." His hand came up, closing gently around her wrist, holding her touch to his face. "It meant more than I'm good at saying," he admitted, voice low. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of. I'll probably do more before someone writes the last line under my name. But when I think back, when I'm old if I ever get there, I'll think of this porch, and that shot you took, and the way Tom's face looked when he realized the girl he thought he owned was the one who ended him. His mouth quirked. And I'll think of you, with your almost red hair and those damn freckles, standing up in front of a man everybody else in town bowed to, and telling him no." A shimmer of tears brightened her eyes, but they didn't fall. Instead she leaned in. The kiss, when it came, wasn't desperate or panicked. It was slow, a careful meeting of mouths that tasted of dust and coffee, and something sweeter, neither of them had a name for. His hand slid up to the back of her neck, fingers tangling briefly in her hair. She shifted closer, careful of his bandage, one hand braced on his chest, feeling the thrum of his heart under her palm. There was heat there, yes, and the first stirrings of hunger that had nothing to do with food, but there was also a kind of peace, a fragile, aching sense that for a heartbeat, the world had narrowed to a safe, shared space. When they parted, foreheads resting together, breath mingling, she laughed softly. "That felt a little like trouble," she murmured. "Trouble's the only thing I'm good at," he said. "But I'm glad some of it felt right." Dawn came too soon.
The sky over Byrne Springs blushed pink and gold as Billy swung into Malachi's saddle, the bandage at his side, pulling. He'd told Eamon he was going. The old man had gripped his hand and thanked him in a way that didn't need words. Now, at the edge of the yard, Nora stood with her rifle slung and her hair braided back, freckles stark in the early light. She looked every inch the mistress of the land, not some pawn in a rich man's game. "You could still change your mind," she said, though her tone said she knew he wouldn't. "So could you," he replied. "You could come with me. Head south, see what the ocean looks like, see if the Gulf smells like folks say. I hear they got towns down there, where nobody cares what name you give at the bar." She smiled, soft and sad. "This land needs me more than you do," she said. "Pa can't run it alone, and someone needs to be here when the railroad men come back, to show them Malcolm Pike doesn't own the future." She stepped forward, took his hand, and pressed something small and cool into it. He looked down. It was a locket, brass worn smooth. Inside, when he flicked it open, was a tiny sketch of the ranch house and the spring behind it, done in fine pencil strokes. "So you don't forget what you helped save," she said. "And so you remember, there's at least one spot in this whole hard country where you'll always be welcome." His throat felt tight. "You keep making it hard to ride away," he said. "Good," she replied. "Maybe it'll slow you down enough you miss one bullet someday." He laughed, a rough sound that felt good in his chest. Then, before he could think better of it, he leaned down and kissed her once more, a quick, fierce press of lips that tasted like goodbye and promise in equal measure. "Take care of yourself, Nora Byrne," he said. "You too, Billy the Kid," she answered. "Try not to get yourself killed before the stories about today make it as far as Texas." He tipped his hat, tucked the locket into his shirt near his heart, and turned Malachi toward the open land. As he rode away, the sun climbing at his back, he didn't look over his shoulder. He didn't need to. He could feel Byrne Springs behind him, like a warm hand between his shoulder blades, pushing him forward, reminding him that for once, he'd left a place better than he'd found it. In the months that followed, folks told the tale in all sorts of ways. Some said Billy the Kid and Jesse James robbed a king's ransom from Malcolm Pike and left him bleeding in the dust. Some said a near red-headed rancher girl with freckles shot the devil's son and broke a curse over a valley. Some said there was no justice west of the Mississippi, only men with faster guns. But if you rode out toward the North Pass and found Byrne Springs, you'd see a woman on a horse with a rifle across her lap, watching the land like it was part of her body, her father at her side, both of them walking that thin line between peace and the next fight. And somewhere far off, a young outlaw with a bad reputation and a secret brass locket rode on, his legend growing, his heart a little heavier and a little lighter at the same time. If you liked riding along with this story of Billy the Kid, Nora Byrne, and the fight for Byrne Springs, drop your rating from 0 to 10, hit that subscribe button, and leave a like so I know you want more dusty trails, dangerous choices, and stubborn hearts out here in the Old West.
He told her about the mission, the crates, the laundering. He told her about Malcolm's plans for her father, for the ranch if she didn't fall in line. As he spoke, her face went from pale to something else. The fear didn't leave, but it made room for anger, for a stubborn set to her jaw that reminded him of stories he'd heard about Irish women standing in front of thatched cottages as soldiers marched up. "So we're not just up against one bad man," she said, voice steady in its way. "We're sitting on the hinge of a whole rotten door." "Something like that," he said, "which means running won't fix it. We could ride south, cross into Mexico, disappear for a while. But Malcolm will set fire to your home and call it justice. He'll use your father's land to clean every piece of stolen blood money he can get his hands on. And the railroad will smile and shake his hand." Nora looked past him, eyes distant, seeing smoke where it hadn't risen yet. "I won't leave my father," she said.